Hello, my name is Joseph Alfasa. I'm an MBA student for the Swiss Asian MBA, and today I will be presenting my assignment for the Communication and Conflict Management course. The subject is communication in high context versus low context culture. So the presentation outline is such: introduction. I will talk about why is it important and what's the importance of it. I'll talk about conceptual framework, practical application, personal reflection, and I'll finish it with conclusion. So first of all, introduction. How important is cross-cultural communication and why? Well, the first reason is globalization. It's very common today that for every kickoff meeting for every international companies, you'll have people sitting in West and East, in the US, in China, in Germany, and in Spain, all from very different cultures, sitting in the same meeting and talking the same language. Therefore, in cross-cultural communication is very important. And the second reason, it may reduce conflicts. So being a global citizen and being culturally aware reduces conflicts that may arise from cultural differences. And for the pictures, I choose the Tel Aviv beach and pictures of Shanghai because I spent my entire life, 28 years, most of my life, 28 years living in Israel. And now I moved to China. So I feel like this subject is very close to my heart. Okay, so what is Edward Hall's scale? Low context versus high context. We know that communication differs greatly across cultures. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall developed a very useful framework for understanding different communication styles, creating a distinction between high and low context cultures. Here in the chart, you can see high context cultures like Japanese, Arabian, Latin American, versus low context, such as Swiss, German, and Scandinavian. This topic is very important for our MBA because it's Swiss and Asian. And you can see these are both ends of the spectrum. So what are the characteristics of high context versus low context culture? Essentially, low context tend to prefer direct verbal interaction. What you see and what you hear is what you get. There's no hidden message. And high context tend to prefer indirect verbal interaction, which means whatever they say have a lot of context behind it. Secondly, they tend to understand the meaning at one level only. That is for low context versus high context. They tend to understand meaning embodied in many sociocultural levels. Low contexts are generally less proficient in reading nonverbal cues versus high context culture that's more proficient in reading nonverbal cues, and so on and so on. The most interesting thing for me is that low context, they value individualism. You can see that greatly in US cultures and even Israel, where I'm from. And high context cultures such as Chinese, Japanese, the group membership is most important. And this I feel every day here in China. What are practical applications of such a thing? Well, the first thing, we need to recognize and adapt to the stakeholders' style of communication. This is the first step and it's crucial. So low context communicators should pay extra attention to nonverbal messages and gestures, face having intact, and to build good relationship over time. In low context communication cultures, there's no such thing as face saving. What you hear is what you get, as I said before, but in high context communication, saving face is incredibly important. And for high context communication, they should remember that what they say may be taken at face value. So it will be taken as they say it is. Direct questions are intended to advance the conversation rather than to offend anyone. Also, should acknowledge that indirect messages may be missed entirely. I want to talk about an important distinction because people are unique and diversified. While it is true that most people in a specific culture, whether it's high or low context culture, will indeed fit the theory, it is important to remember that personal aspect, people from different cultures, they are different in personality. Uh, People are different from each other and on a personal level, and it's not uncommon to find a Chinese person with a low context, while you can find an Israeli person who speaks with very high context. So we need to note that cultural bias should be avoided. Personal reflection. Well, I come from Israel, a culture that is very much low context. What you see, what you hear is what you get. We're very direct and even confrontational sometimes. This might be due to our military service that we all did, all Israelis. Um, so we're very used to clear and direct communication. Now that I work in China, a country that is the complete opposite, many times I find myself too direct and maybe offensive, unfortunately, without meaning to. On quite a few work trips to different provinces and cities, I found myself confused due to the practical lack of discussions that I was preparing for. And I also added this graph, which is very interesting. And I find me and all my expats friends, especially here in China, we've all went through the same adjustments. So first is arrival to the country. You're very happy. You have your own perception of the country. Then you receive your cultural shock. You realize it's very different than what we thought it is. And the third one is most important for me is the adjustments, learning the culture that we're in and trying to adjust ourselves to it. And number four is acceptance, which also is a part of number three. And conclusion. With globalization, the frequency of communication between cultures of all types will continue to rise. High context theory versus low context is a great tool for every person or in an organization to create clear and clean communication. Thank you very much.